Good morning, Garland Nixon here, live with my dear friend and brother, Laith Marouf, who is in Beirut, Lebanon. He's going to update us on what's happening in the Middle East. Let's talk.
Hey, hey.
Good morning. So Laith is live in the heart of it all. He's in Beirut, Lebanon, a dear friend of mine, and he's agreed to come on here. Hopefully, we can get him on here more frequently to get the real updates to find out what's really going on. Hey, Laith, you have where can people find you online?
I got deleted personally from virtual reality at order of the Congress and the Canadian Parliament in 2022. But we have this great project. It's a community television station in Lebanon with volunteers training students from different universities trying to bring content in English about what's happening. It's called Free Palestine TV. The website is freepalestine.video. It's on Twitter, it's on Telegram, it's on Instagram. Please, you want to volunteer, add some content in support for the liberation of Palestine. Join us. If you want to donate, you can also donate there for this great community work.
What's the name of it again? I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, it's Free Palestine TV, and the website is called freepalestine.video. And you can get all the information about Twitter, Rumble, Telegram. All of that is there. The pages.
Wonderful. All right, let's start. The latest news. What do we need to know that update us on what's happening in the region regarding the attack on Gaza?
Well, just a few hours ago, there was an announcement that the Yemeni armed forces hit an American and a British, ships, merchant ships that were trying to cross the Bab el Mandeb. This comes after, of course, days and days of bombardment by the American and British Air Force of Yemen, including yesterday bombing much residential neighborhoods in Al Hudaydah and in the north of Yemen in Hajj province. So this we now know that the attempts by the Americans to force Yemen not to support Palestinian resistance and are failing. Of course, some of your viewers will be savvy enough to remember that the same Houthis, as we call them, or Ansarullah, have fought 8 different wars against the United States and the Saudi and Gulf vassals of the United States since 1990, and they have never been defeated. So that's clearly a losing war. And the resistance in Iraq and Syria hit today around the sunrise time. The American bases in Syria. That shows just again the United States is failing in its attempt to stop the resistance in Iraq and Syria from supporting the resistance in Palestine. This, of course, is also continuing in Lebanon here on the south. Earlier this morning, multiple attacks on one of the main listening posts of the Israeli forces in the north of Palestine. And the resistance continues in Gaza unabated. Of course, the genocide continues also at a pace. We heard the reports from yesterday, 110 civilians killed in Gaza.
So, what is the reaction in the region? What are the thoughts in the region to the United States? Recent bombings the other day that was allegedly, responding to the attack where 3 soldiers were killed. What do you know about that attack? Do you know any more than we know about it? And what do you know about what is the response to to the recent U.S. bombing?
Well, yesterday we had a United Nations Security Council meeting convened at the request of Russia to speak about the attacks, 80 something air raids by the United States that included strategic bombers and hypersonic bombers, B-1s and B-52s and so forth on Iraqi and Syrian military and positions. So we heard the Iraqi representative and the Syrian representative speaking also at the Security Council yesterday, both of them condemning those attacks as violations of the sovereignty of their countries, violations of their independence, and an attack on their official military. Iraq is really pissed. Because official Iraqi military positions were attacked, and there's at least 30 somewhat civilians and servicemen, Iraqi servicemen, killed in those American attacks. We hear open now that by the head of the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces, that are kind of the National Guard of Iraq, that are an official part of the Iraqi military. He said in the speeches during the funerals yesterday that they will not be content with just speeches, that they will be responding militarily to the attacks by the United States. So this is now an official declaration of war by the official Iraqi military. So things are going to, I think, escalate fast now because the United States decided to, or as we see now, conduct war from Yemen to Iraq to Syria, and while all to defend the commission of genocide in Gaza.
We talk about, there's a discussion in the U.S. and in the West about, in the U.S. empire about escalation. Joe Biden doesn't want things to escalate. When I look at it, the U.S. is bombing Syria, Iraq, Yemen, providing all the weapons to Israel. To me, it's preposterous to talk about the potential for it escalating. It seems like we already have a wider war. Do you view it like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are in a regional war. It hasn't reached its top intensity possible, but if you look at the map, you have direct American military attacks on Yemen, Iraq, Syria. There is, of course, the war inside Palestine and the genocide inside Gaza. We have Lebanon, back and forth on the border every day, between 8 to 24 attacks on Israeli positions. We have, as we had, the attack on American base inside Jordan. We have Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt all using their air defenses to intercept attacks by resistance, access, and defense of Palestine. All the missiles coming from Yemen and Iraq and Syria are being those air defenses are part of that system. And all the waterways in the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Mediterranean, these are all battlefields. So what more do you want before calling it a regional war? We are in a regional war. The intensity is still in the beginning, but this is the reality we are living. And what the United States and the Zionists in general, which includes all the West, when we say Zionists, the elite in the West, the governments, they want people to not only deny their eyes and what they see, what they hear, what they read, the facts of the genocide happening in Gaza. They want you to deny that there is an actual war happening between the United States, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen now, a direct war between these three countries versus the United States, and pretending that it's not happening. Well, he doesn't want war. Well, the war is already there, but you have to deny it. You have to live in a parallel world as they're requesting you, and peace is war, and war is peace, and left is right, and up is down. It's this the speak of 1948 is Orwell would be like it looks like a joke what Orwell was talking about because we're way past that now.
Now, let me ask you this, because I agree with you. There is an ongoing regional war. The resistance, to me, so far has shown an exceptional amount of restraint. I think this conflict, from what we've seen, and this is what I think. The resistance is in control. The axis of resistance is controlling the escalation in a way that they choose what act takes happens next. And number one, do you feel as though, because everybody thought, boom, it's going to be a blast, splash, smash, boom, as opposed to the axis of resistance be controlling the escalation? What do you see as the next step? What is the next part of the escalation that you see coming?
Yeah, I mean, look, people didn't understand. I think in the beginning, the clear strategic uh, plan that Axis of Resistance has put forward, and the genius part about it is that they put the Zionist colony and the whole West behind it in a quagmire that where they only have two tactical options open to them to reach their own strategic goals. Israel, in that situation, is the continuation of a colony, and the United States, the continuation of being a hegemon, the number one empire in the world. What are the two options in front of the West and Israel from October 7th onwards? We're agreeing to a complete exchange of POWs between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and admitting that they lost that a battle on that day, or go to war of genocide. Okay, and as we see, the reason the axis of resistance is purposefully not pushing for a complete, fast, war with the West and Israel is because number one, they want the least amount of dead to reach their own strategic goal, which is to liberate Palestine. Number two is because the more time you give the West, the more chance that they have to come down the horse, come down the tree, come down from the tree and acknowledge that they've lost a war. Okay, and so until now, at every moment of this escalation in this conflict, the West and Israel still have those two options. And the reason they're choosing number two, genocide, and continuation of escalation of this war to the next stage and the next stage, is because option one, the admittance of defeat and a complete exchange of POWs, will lead to internal collapse of the Zionist colony without one bullet being fired or an invading army to take down this colony. The colony is ready to collapse the minute this war stops, okay? Especially with an admittance of defeat. Therefore, they're choosing not to stop this war and go to the next stages. And this is becoming even more true for the United States, even by the day as we get closer to the elections in November. And so people need to understand that this war is not going to be a short war. We're already in the fourth month finished. I said from the beginning, it's going to be at least 9 months war, if not longer. And this is what we should expect it, that it will not stop before the American elections. And if it doesn't stop before the American elections, it will be a world war.
One of the things, a great book that I've read, you may be familiar with it. It's by General Giap, People's War, People's Army. He's the guy that defeated the French, the general Vietnamese that defeated the French. And he talks about how a people's army defeats a imperial power. And one of the things I think that's interesting that I'm taking from this, he said, basically, you can't line up on the front like they do. They can put 100,000 soldiers, bombers. You do that, you lose. He said, the front is wherever. This is what's to me, this particular part of it is what is so relevant here. One of the things he said is the front is wherever your enemy is. If they've got some few soldiers over here, where they're weak, if they've got a small amount of soldiers over here, you hit them over here. If they've got a bunch of soldiers over there, you leave them over there. You hit them where they're weak continually, right? When I look at what's happening in Iraq, when I look at what's happening in Syria with the various hitting small U.S. bases, small U.S. entities, and also he basically said, you win if you're fighting for a just cause, right? You hit them where they are, you fight them for a just cause, and you the strength of the people's war is in a long drawn out war. It certainly seems to me as though someone in Hezbollah has been reading this book, or the fact of the matter is just the circumstances are that that's where the way they see their path to victory. What do you think about those three things? You win if you have a just war. You hit the enemy where he is in small bunches to make it easier on you, and the front is wherever the enemy is. Your
Yes,
thoughts on that relative to the resistance?
you know, the tactics and strategies of the Vietnamese resistance and the Algerian resistance, which were around the same time, had created the basis and the pillars of an insurgency war against occupation and colonization. And of course, from that day on, not only the Palestinian and the as we see now, the Lebanese and others have learned from that and study it and teach it in their military schools, but they have now innovated further. Look at the tunnel cities under Gaza in comparison to the dirt tunnels of the Vietnamese resistance, where we're talking 60 years of advancement in this science and strategies of insurgency, rebellions. So we're seeing what we see today in Gaza is the epitome of this science. Today, the resistance in Palestine have fought to a standstill in a extermination camp that has no vegetation cover, that has no hard geography, like Algerian mountains. Okay, and for 4 months, and in those 4 months, destroyed practically right now 60% of the armaments of the Israeli ground forces. All the 60% of their tanks and their APCs and what have you destroyed. And we don't know the numbers of dead, of course, of Israeli soldiers. But if we look at the numbers of the ages of their officers that are being declared dead on a daily basis right now, major generals and what have you, that are in their early 20s. You look at the dead this week. That tells you that all the first line officers have been minced. You're down to usually major generals and so forth, and they're in their late 30s. So if you look at the Israeli declared officers' dead names and ages from October 7th to today, you'll see a drop of almost 20 years in age. That means now the Israeli military is at the precipice of collapse. It doesn't have people that are trained and ready and know what they're doing. And till today, they haven't been able to kill one leader in the resistance in Gaza or reach any of their bases underground.
Wow. One of the things that I think is this. People are looking at what happened now. When did it start? Here's what I think. When the U.S. empire decided that they were going to take Syria, 2011 and on, The Axis of Resistance, which I would argue included Russia, because Russia came in a big, brought in the air power. They brought in a big fist, but they coordinated with, Soleimani, with the Hezbollah, with the they came in, and the Axis of Resistance decided, you're not taking Syria, that's ours. You're not taking it. That's part of our resistance, and they ran the U.S. out. U.S. empire decided we're going to go to Russia's border and squeeze them out. And, Vladimir Putin's not that kind of guy. He's not the kind of guy to do that. And he said, nah, we're going to have to fight this one out. And now they're back. It seems to me that the Syrian conflict, as it were, was really the beginning of this. And that as a result of the Ukraine conflict, which might I add, they're losing that too, that the Africans said, the French, you got to get the hell out of Africa. We've had enough of you. You know what I mean? The Axis of Resistance, we're not dealing with anymore. It seems like it started with Syria, but when Russia punched back at the U.S. empire, that at that point, everybody just said, we've had enough. The fight has started. And I think the Ukrainian conflict was very important. And from the looks of things, Joe Biden's about to lose both of those almost at the same time. Anyway, I threw out a lot. Your thought, comment on all of that stuff as you see fit, Laith.
I like to explain it to people that don't know much about global history in the last 100 years, to imagine it very fast. The end of, let's say, the collapse of the Soviet Union, 1990. The United States immediately took advantage of the collapse of the Soviet Union and began an expansion of its holdings, its territories, specifically targeting any country that escaped colonialism after World War II and was now not defended by the Soviet Union. Yugoslavia, Iraq, blah, 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 okay? And so from 1990 till the war in Syria, that was the period of the expansion of the American empire. And in Syria and the defeat of the United States in Syria meant that was the furthest point of expansion of the American empire. Now comes the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine symbolizes the first moment of retreat in territory holdings of the American empire. The United States lost all of East and South Ukraine. Those were territories it held at its maximum reach of its imperial holdings, and now began the retreat of the holdings in the war in Ukraine. Today, the war in Palestine, and if clearly the United States is going to lose this war, except if it decides wants to do nuclear holocaust on the region. What the United States and the Zionist colony are losing, and it is foretold right now that there will be no more Israel, no more Zionist colony as we know it, as an apartheid. There will be a democratic state for everybody that wants to live there, whatever their faith is, okay? But the point is, it's already foretold. And what does this mean? This means that the United States, if it loses the Zionist colony, it will lose the jewel of imperial holdings since World War I. It will lose control of all of Western Asia and North Africa, and this will be force the retreat of imperial borders to an actual natural borders of the United States and Europe. That's their natural borders. And if they lose Palestine, they will retreat to their natural borders. So these are how we can think about it very simply.
Let me ask you this, a quick question about Ukraine. I know you had discussed Ukraine from the perspective of the Crusades and the religious aspect of it, the Crusaders making it to the Dnieper River. I'm sure our listeners have not heard that perspective, and I thought it was brilliant, and I've contemplated on many days, but I'd like more people to hear that. Explain that Ukraine dynamic that you basically, I'd say, that I learned from you, that you taught me.
Yeah, look, everything that we see happening here today in Palestine and in Ukraine is related directly to the Crusades, the attempt to, force ethnically cleanse and force convert people to Catholicism as it happened. So remember, the Crusades into the Eastern Mediterranean were defeated, and they had to retreat back to Europe. And once they got there, they began, turned on their own people, and we saw the witch hunts and the ethnic cleansing of Iberian Peninsula, the what they call the Reconquista, the genocide of Muslim and Jewish, an expulsion of Muslim and Jewish people in Iberia, in Spain, and Portugal, and then they turned towards the Slavic lands, which were Orthodox, and this is why there is a schism within Slavic culture. The Polish people and the Czech and the Slovakians and the Croatians, and all the way to the river and that splits Ukraine. Those were people that were forcefully converted into Catholicism through the sword. And this is why Ukraine is split, one part Orthodox and one part Catholic, because of this crusade into Slavic lands. And so today we here, and people in Ukraine, we are still living that moment in history, because the West still insists on continuing it on us through, as we see here, instead of a crusade, we see a crusade, where people are being, forced to, call a chosen people and say a God-given land and speak of Armageddon and kill anyone who doesn't, believe in this mythology. And similarly, in Ukraine, people are being punished, as we saw, for being Orthodox. The churches that were burned, the priests that were rounded and jailed, and we don't know what happened to them. The attacks on the iconology of Orthodoxy, the destruction of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is a crusade in a modern way, and now it's led by a Zionist president of Ukraine. This is, again, and by the way, our region is so close to Ukraine. What's between Syria and Ukraine is Syria, Turkey, the Black Sea, Ukraine. We feel when things happen in Ukraine, and they affect the whole region here.
One of the things I think that's interesting is the U.S. claiming, the Biden administration and the wokies, liberals, oh, we're against white supremacy, racism, and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at their actions in Ukraine, I mean, people who literally are walking around very, very proud to, I'm on YouTube, so I'll say support the mustachioed gentleman from Austria of the 1940s, to support that ideology, to sport the iconography of the Third Reich proudly. The guy that they're talking about putting in charge, Zelensky, takes pictures in front of Stepan Bandera. He's got he's been photographed with a bracelet with a swastika on it. The interesting thing about it is, at the same time, Joe Biden's a Zionist. Never again. We must make sure that nothing terrible ever happens to the Jewish people because the Nazis and blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, what's happening in Ukraine. And might I add this, and they're doing the same thing. The Ukrainian fascists are saying there's a group of people, they're Russians on the other side of the border, and they're subhuman and they need to be genocided, killed, wiped out, and they tried their best to do it until the Russians stepped in, right? And the Zionists are doing exactly, the dynamics are identical in those two countries when it comes to ideology, etc., and what they're doing. But what we're told is they're the opposite people. We're actually protecting the Zionists from people who support the exact ideology of those that we're supporting in another country. Your thought on this or your thoughts on this contradiction, Leif?
Yeah, I mean, look, this shows you how malleable this manufactured white peoplehood is. You know, there is no such thing as a white person, white peoplehood. You know, there's Latin cultures, you know, like French, Italian, Spanish. There's Germanic cultures like the Anglos and the Dutch and so forth. There's Scandinavian cultures. Arabs are not a race. There's no such thing as a race, obviously. These are all, but this attempt to fabricate a peoplehood around this, what is whiteness, which is the privilege to genocide others and colonize them and steal their resources and lands. That's what this fabricated identity is malleable. And we see in the beginning, for instance, it was purely for Germanic peoples. So because the United States was mainly a German Anglo colony in the beginning, by the way, the United States almost voted to have German as its official language. It lost by a few votes. Latin people were outside this. You know, the French, the Italians, the Spanish were looked on as subhuman also by the Germanic founders. And then this whiteness, absorbed the Latin peoples into it around World War II, as we saw. The Italians Italian pizza and Italian movies started becoming something good to watch. And of course, Jewish Europeans were excluded from this whiteness, and after World War II started becoming included in it. And as we see right now, they are the epitome, the top of what is to be white. And Slavic people were supposed to be excluded wholly from that. And those who speak English know that the word slave comes from the word Slav, because that's who the majority of slaves in European territory were prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And now we see, for the first time, a Slavic people being included into this whiteness with the Ukrainian war, and all because to allow these new acquired peoples into whiteness a feeling to be above and beyond their Russian brothers and sisters who have the same culture. Ukrainian is just an accent of Russian. It's not even a language. Ukraine, the word Ukraine, that it means the borderlands of what? Of the Russian people. It's like your name, you call yourself a person that comes from the borderlands of Russia. That's your name. And you want to deny that you actually belong with the people of Russia, the culture, the language, the history. This is what's crazy about whiteness and those who fall for it. And there is Arab white people, and there's black, quote unquote, white people like Obama. And we've seen, as long as you accept the genocide of others and colonization as a just thing to do because of which group you belong to, then you're white.
Interesting. Your thoughts on, I look at Telegram. Now we hear, that there's a fierce fighting and what have you. We do daily, of course, right now, it seems to me the only thing that the Israel army is really good at defeating is women and children and old people, that they can kill them. But every day I look on Telegram and all, Twitter and all that, and I see what appears to me to be very successful operations by the resistance factions in Gaza. Scott Ritter, before this even started, said they're going into a trap, that this is Leningrad, that once these buildings fall and they set up this rubble, that they have no chance against the people who live there and who have planned for this battle all their lives and are motivated. Your thoughts on what are we not hearing about the fight on the ground? What are we not hearing here about the what appears to be the military pummeling that um, the Israeli, the IDF, whatever you want to call it, is suffering?
Yeah, I mean, clearly on the Telegram right now is one of the main sources of information for anybody that wants to or doesn't speak Arabic or doesn't have access to the main channels that are in the region here. And on a daily basis, the groups that belong to these axis of resistance militias are releasing videos of their activities on a daily basis. So we watch videos from Hamas and Islamic Jihad inside Gaza on destroying 3-4 tanks each on every day, and we see them killing tens of Israeli soldiers, all on camera, documented, while the Israeli government keeps on saying, very low numbers of deaths that are unbelievable. And we see videos coming out from Hezbollah showing us the amazing accuracy of the weapons that they're using. A couple of days ago, they released a video of their missiles hitting the Israeli listening post on top of Jabal al-Sheikh, Mount Hermon, the highest point of the Syrian-occupied Golan Heights, which is actually the highest point in all of the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. Destroyed totally. It's a snow-covered base, and all boom, 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 destroyed. We saw videos from them showing us these new ATGMs that they have. Nobody has used these ATGMs before and shown us the use of them, that have actual cameras on the head of the missile, and they don't only go like left and right as ATGMs do. This one goes up and down, and they showed us how they hit these installations that are domes behind fortifications in the main Israeli Air Force control base in North Palestine, in Miron base. And in that video, you see as this missile is coming down on the dome and hits it, that actually every other structure in the base, every other antenna, every other control room is destroyed. So you see that the other missiles have hit their bases, and this is happening on a daily basis. So if we talk about add to it what the resistance from Iraq is doing. They just announced today that they hit Eilat and the Mediterranean port city of Sidriot. So the Iraqi resistance is hitting now bases inside the Zionist colony. And I don't know, I think, personally believe, this is why the United States is accelerating its intervention militarily in the region, because in reality, the Zionist colony is totally militarily defeated. It's on the edge of military collapse. And if at this moment a bigger war breaks out in the region without direct American readiness and interference in it, the Zionist colony will be wiped out.
One of the things that isn't being discussed at all is the results of the economic blockade that Ansar Allah has instituted, which is interesting. The United States is always sanctioning people, and we're going to hurt them, and they're not going to be able to, have money. And let's face it, technologically weak, but ethically powerful entity, the Ansar Allah. It basically, the U.S. is unable to defeat them, unable to stand up against them. If you ask me, Ansar Allah is pulling its punches. They could hit the U.S. A lot harder if they really chose. Even they're right now holding the U.S. off. But what's not being talked about is the results. I'm hearing that shelves are getting, the grocery store shelves in Israel are getting empty, that prices are going up, that there's a very, very deep economic recession, depression, whatever, looming over Israel. Do you, being in the region, do you hear anything? I mean, let's face it, if aren't coming in, and if they've got to go way around who knows where, and the prices are 40% higher, your kind people can't work because they're either gone from their area out of fear, or they're activated to fight. What do you know about the economic fallout from Ansar Allah's economic siege that you might just call that they put against Israel?
This action by the Yemenis, I think, hurt the Zionist colony and the West as a whole the most out of all the fronts, except, of course, what's happening inside Gaza, with the least cost up until now. And so it shows you, on the one hand, what a sovereign nation like Yemen, when it takes actions that are sovereign to it, and how its own geography and its location in the world then takes its rightful weight on global scale. Yemen should always have been a decision maker on a global scale because of its natural geography, where it is, its history. It's not the Dubai glass towers built in the last 40 years that should have a place on an international scene. It is Yemen. And that is now, I believe, giving all peoples in the world that want sovereignty and international independence, and a right to speak on a human platform to all of humanity, giving them a push. We see Guyana, we see El Salvador, we see all these countries that should have a say because of their location now speaking out. And so I think that the actions of Yemen have set the tone for not only our region here. It's opening doors for the world. It's also important to remember that the United States is occupying Syria and Iraq now against the will of both those countries, and is supposed to be responding to attacks from people that are occupied. And similarly, they are attacking Yemen because it is not allowing the starvation of Gaza to happen at no price. The Yemeni people, this is also very funny. The Yemeni people from day one said, we will lift the siege on the Zionist ports when you lift the siege on Gaza. Allow food to come in, we'll let your trade go in. And what does the West do? They're like, no, 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 we bomb you. And they say, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Gaza. Every day you hear the American and British leadership saying, no, no, the attacks of Yemen have nothing to do with Gaza. And every day you hear the Yemeni officials saying, we're doing this for Gaza. And so the amount of denial that they're requesting us, denial of reality that the Western elite are requesting of the audience, is to a level that I don't think has happened in human history before.
I think that one of the things that empire does is to try to control international lanes of commerce. Always has been. The UK, the British ruled the waves, the Spanish Armada. Historically, the empires, the colonial empires, the US empire has viewed controlling, basically being able to lay siege to people. We can shut down your ships and you can't do anything. And one of the things they look at Taiwan and the South China Sea is to be able to control shipping and to say to China, we can shut down your shipping and control blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's the game. It now appears that that's not possible anymore. that I believe this. When this conflict is over, the powers in the world, whether it's China, Russia, Iran is now a world power, will be rushing into Yemen saying, can we rebuild? Can we put money? Can we become friends? Now that they've realized two things: their geostrategic location is critical to world commerce, and their wherewithal to fight any enemy at any time, regardless of the outcome, makes them one of the most, oddly enough, one of the most poorest, but one of the most powerful nations in the world. What do you think about the fact that the Chinas, the Russians, the Iran, everybody in the world, when this is over, is going to be going into Yemen saying, how can we build? How can we become friends with you? How can we support you? How can we arm you? Whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Look, it's a geostrategic location, and my God, the country is so beautiful. The beaches of Yemen on both the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, the mountains, the architecture, the first human high risers from mud, beautiful, beautiful people. The islands, Socotra with its natural beauty of plants and living things that don't exist anywhere else on this planet. The amount, the food, the music. This is natural. Should be one of the most important countries in the world. Remember the history of the Yemeni people. They were some of the best sailors and traders through waterways in history of humanity. They did business all the way down to Mozambique and all the way to the Philippines on their ships. And because of their humility and the love that they have and the way they act, everywhere they went, everybody turned Muslim without one sword being lifted. The Muslims in the Philippines and Indonesia, all of Indonesia became Muslim just because, and Malaysia, all of that became Muslim just from interactions with Yemenis and intermarriages and trade, and equality. So Yemen has to and will naturally come back to its position if it wasn't for the 100 years of attempt of destruction, destroying this country. Remember, the British occupied most of its coastline up until the mid 60s and conducted a genocide of the Yemeni people to stop their resistance. If you watch the videos, what Israelis are doing to Gaza right now is very similar to what the British did to Yemen. And when they were defeated, by the way, that same battalions that were occupying Yemen were taken to Ireland and conducted the massacres in the 60s and 70s of Irish people.
Wow. Your thoughts on something that I thought about for since the beginning of this. There are a number of Arab countries wherein the people are overwhelmingly in support of the Palestinians and overall in support of the resistance, but the leaders are trying. Some of them are, outright puppets for the West, but others are trying to walk a very thin path where they are concerned, but because they know they can't go but so far away from public opinion, but they are inured to the U.S. empire. Your thoughts? I thought these leaders got to be careful because some of them could be overthrown. That in the event that a hot war breaks out in the Middle East, that how do these leaders side with the? I think people in their own militaries will overthrow them. Will side with them anyway. Your thoughts on that dynamic of these leaders who are inured to the U.S. empire in the West, but the people have made it clear which side they've taken.
Yeah, look, every country in the Arabic world that is still a kingdom or principality or whatever you want to, that has a royal family. These are countries that the decolonization revolutions failed in them. and didn't succeed, meaning they stayed as Western vessels. Jordan, all the Gulf countries, and Morocco are still vessel kings that were put into power. In fact, most of the Gulf countries, other than Saudi Arabia, were given independence and a status and created as countries. Their names didn't even exist before that, in the late 60s and early 70s, that the British created Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates. And that was all in response to the success of the Yemeni revolution, and the expulsion of the British from Yemen, and they were almost going to lose Oman. There was the Darfur rebellion there, and they almost lost Bahrain in a rebellion, and they of course rushed and created these fake countries and appointed these puppet kings. And Nasser, Jamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian president, and the Arab Unionist and national liberation movements attempted and failed to overthrow these puppet kings, and they're still in power today. Of course, we also lost Egypt after the death of Nasser, and it returned to American, sphere of influence. Those countries will not exist the minute the United States exit the region. It's not a joke. This is a fact. If the United States, first off, if Palestine is liberated, there will be no Jordan, no Syria, no Iraq. It will naturally get unified. There will be millions of Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese, Jordanians crossing into Palestine, and nobody will be able to get them back. And millions of Palestinians crossing, and there will be no more borders. Psychist people will fall the minute Palestine is liberated. And when that happens, and if the United States is expelled from our region, there's nothing to protect those Gulf monarchs, and the United States will lose its biggest racket. 80 years of siphoning off all the wealth of the Arabic people, and their oil will disappear. That's what propped up the American empire since the end of World War II.
It also seems to me that Russia and China are allying with are becoming the allies of the region. That, as I said, the Russians. Here's what's interesting. Your thoughts on the Russians, the Soviet Union, and I think this is important discussion to have. Africa, the Soviet Union, when there were independence movements fighting against U.S. and European colonialism, the Soviet Union supported them. The Soviet Union armed them, right? And they haven't forgotten. And it seems to me now, I just heard that Burkina Faso was saying, well, yes, we just received a shipment of missiles. The Russians are building a, who knows who they might have come from to protect our country. It seems to me that Russia or China or somebody is starting to arm these countries, understanding that the U.S. empire doesn't just give up, that they have to be armed in order to defend their sovereignty. It seems like now that Russia is rising again, it seems to be getting back in the game of we're going to stop the U.S. empire, understanding the importance of it. Russia and China, wherein China seems to me kind of a backstop for Russia financially so that the U.S. can't completely, take them out of the economic game and destroy them. Your thoughts on the Russia and China in this whole movement in Africa, in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, etc. And certainly there seems to be some movements in Latin America. But right now, the fight is in the Middle East and Africa. Russia and China, what are your thoughts about their part in this game? How you see them?
Yeah, look, was a great moment when Russia finally took a military position in Syria. That gave us, as human beings, a clear possibility that the United States will not burn us all down. And now seeing China come out and mature on the global stage and take its rightful place, and looking at the speeches of the Chinese officials and the United Nations representative and so on, and about what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq. This is language that we haven't heard in since the Cold War days, and that shows you that number one, these countries have the ability now to compete and defeat economically in the case of China, or militarily in the case of Russia, any incursions by the West. And I would add to that Iran. Iran, I think, also changed the whole scene on the global scale because of its production of drones and guided missiles at a affordable scale for all the medium players that now can act as a big player with a much smaller budget. As we see the resistance in Palestine, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, are able to take on the whole NATO war machine and still have them on a standstill, and we don't know where this is going to end. So the world has changed because of the return of Russia and China into the international scene, and the rise of medium player that has brought us advancement in technologies that make other medium players become viable in this game. We could see, like now, Venezuela, for instance, or South Africa, or others, if they take the same path that Iran took, to rise to that point very easily also.
I would add North Korea also. I think North Korea is a very important, particularly their location, and the fact that they have been kind of like Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela, that they never buckled up to the empire, that they never buckled one day. And it seems to me that that Russia and China now have recognized that, and seems to me that they are heavily arming North Korea. You can see North Korea becoming again, not an assertive offensive military power, but a defensive military power. And it seems to me that Iran, I'll put it like this. I've recently said this. In their region, Iran is a superpower. You know what I mean? It's kind of like in self-defense. There are people that if you fight them, they're ground fighters. They know ground fighting. They used to be the EFC, the Gracie brothers from Brazil, or what have you. The grapplers. There are people that if you keep them at a distance and fight them, they can be defeated. If you let them get a grab on you, they are super. You know what I mean? They're a superhero on ground fighting. You're going to lose every time. Iran seems to me that they have set things up in their region by arming just the right people, by providing technology to the right people in the right locations, by giving what I like to call stewardship. Here, I will help you train. I will help you. I will help you with your technology. I'll help you with everything you need, but I'm going to give you stewardship and allow you to make your own decisions. And we'll all act together, and we'll all. To me, that Iran's strategy in the region has been nothing short of brilliant, and they have become not a regional power, but a regional superpower, in that the United States, these neocons were saying, attack them, attack them, attack them. And those with half a brain were saying, if we attack Iran in that region, we will quickly be dispatched. We can't do it. Your thoughts on Iran's rise as what I call a regional superpower, which to some extent, people say world power, the US, Russia, China. But if you are a regional superpower, in a way that makes you a world power. Your thoughts on Iran and that particular conversation?
Yeah, definitely they are a regional superpower, and because of course, for the United States to engage them, they have to come to their territory, and because of all the assets that the the United States provides on the ground that are close to Iran that could be destroyed so easily. And this is a nation of 90 plus million people, harsh geography of mountains. This is not a country you can occupy. You can may not even bombing it from the air will be effective. So it's a done deal. Any commentator in the United States that says that they can go to war with Iran and not cause first off hundreds of thousands of dead American soldiers and destruction of all of the assets here, or and maybe a world war is stupid. Anybody that says that the United States can go to war with Iran without that huge cost. So this is why, as we will see right now, because Iran democratized the technology, military technology, and advanced it in such ways that many other players not only can access the weapons, but also can access the technology and build their own weapons from it. Now things are out of control of just attacking one person, killing Soleimani here, or killing another general there is going to change anything. No, it's the jack is out of the box, as you would say, and there's nothing, you can't put it back. And right now we will be. This is why we will see ourselves going slowly in this war of Gaza. It will continue intensity rising. We will not get to a war with Iran. Impossible yet, except if we see in the election of the United States something big is going to happen. And the United States is losing badly on the ground in Iraq and Syria and Yemen. That may lead us to the United States attacking Iran, but no, but God helps us all, not only in this region, but in the United States itself, to what's going to come next if that happens.
I really believe this. I only got a few more minutes, but I believe this. I believe the action by Ansar Allah in the Red Sea has significantly decreased the odds of the U.S. attacking Iran for this reason. The U.S., the neocons argued, because basically anyone who understands international economics said, well, if Iran shuts down the Straits of Hormuz, that's it for the U.S. economy. 30-40% of the world's oil goes through there. That is it, game, set, match. And of course, we have all of the energy speculators on the market and derivatives. That all collapses, right? So they understood Straits of Hormuz closes, the U.S. economy is closed for business, shut down. We're in a massive, recession, depression. Okay. But the neocons argued, oh, that's okay. We could keep the Straits of Hormuz open. They can't keep the Red Sea open with Ansar Allah. They can't do it. No, we don't have the power to do that. So there is no thought that. Bottom line is, Iran would not have to fire a missile. If the U.S. bombed them tomorrow, they could say, we're not shooting back. We're not doing anything until further notice. The Straits of Hormuz, it's mined. We put everything in there. Any ships that come through there, we're going to shoot them immediately, and that's it. They win the war. It would be over without firing a shot. Your thoughts on that aspect and that power that Iran has, and might I add, since Yemen is an ally, they could then say, come to think of it, the Red Sea and the Straits of Hormuz both are completely closed until you capitulate or you follow the following demands. And at that point, Europe's economy over all the colonial powers economically wilt away. And the last time I checked, Russia's pumping a lot of oil, and they're still supplying China. They could still supply India and some of their allies, and the price of oil would go through the roof. So Russia would make a fortune, and the U.S. would crash. Their allies in the region wouldn't be able to get the royal families wouldn't be able to get their oil to market. So the U.S. and their allies in the region would suffer the most. Of course, the people in those countries would then look at their royal families and say, what are you doing here? So your thoughts on the issue of the Red Sea and the Straits of Hormuz and the ability of the resistance to control those important routes. Of course, then you got the Mediterranean. You've got all of the trade routes in the region that the resistance could slam the door on and put a stop sign tomorrow, and it's over for Europe and the U.S. economy. Anyway, your thoughts
You
on it?
know, there was a few things that maybe our viewers didn't notice, but the attacks by Ansarullah on ships in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea were the first documented use of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles to hit a moving naval target in real action, okay, in history. This is a huge achievement. So they're hitting moving ships with ballistic and cruise missiles on a daily basis. And they almost hit, according to them, they hit American Navy ships. The Americans say that the missiles were shot down or hit right beside the ship. Finally, they also hit two Israeli ships, one beside the Seychelles and one off the coast of India. So Ansarullah Yemen has the ability to shut down the whole Indian Ocean and all trade in it without Iran even intervening in such battle. Okay, so those were all signals, and they were purposefully not reported on a big scale in the West because it shows that actually all the hundreds of billions of dollars that the United States put into these aircraft carriers and aircraft carrier groups and so forth are useless in the face of Yemen, let alone Iran, Russia, or China. In a war of trying to blockade China's waterways, what will be left of American Navy ships in the South China Seas? Nothing. So Yemen has opened new doors in the world of military, knowledge and actions.
Yeah, I have to say the U.S. has to be, if you've got half a brain, you've got to look at what's happening in the region and say to yourself, well, we better give up any thoughts of fighting China or Russia because you can't beat Yemen. You give up any, at this point, they're so weak. The U.S. empire is so weak, it can't defeat Yemen. They don't want to put troops on the ground. They found out with Saudi Arabia, if they put troops on the ground to fight Yemen, Yemen would be perfect. They celebrate the opportunity to fight the U.S. empire. So the U.S. empire is so now weak, they can't defeat Yemen. They can't, their supposedly fourth most powerful army in the world in Israel are losing to Hamas and PIJ, guys that just have rocket barrel grenades and AK-47s. The thought of we're going to challenge China or Russia at this point seems, I mean, to me, you can't even have that conversation anymore when in their region they wouldn't last hours against Iran if Iran so chose. It seems to me that basically militarily, politically, economically, the coming to the Mideast to fight has virtually castrated the United States. I mean, you get the last word.
And you know what? This is what's instigating more and more Nazi ultra-right rise in the West, even you using this word castration, because they actually feel that. The elite, the Zionist elite, all these videos that they're releasing, the Zionist soldiers every day on TikTok and others of them committing war crimes and dancing on top of dead babies and destruction of schools, and they're doing it because they feel castrated. They want to show that they can commit war crimes and genocide live on TV and nobody can stop us, right? This is what it's instigating. The defeat of the Israeli military in Gaza is instigating more and more Nazi far right, and whatever leadership is going to come into Israel is going to be even more Nazi than it is right now. Similarly, in the United States, this is what we have to be ready for. In the United States and in Canada and other places, the defeat that the Canadian and European and American troops are being handed in the West is now going to instigate more far right. And as we come into the elections in these countries, the UK, Canada, the US, they're all going to have election before the end of the year. We will see all these politicians coming in to compete on who's more Nazi, who's more Zionist, who's more supportive of genocide. And our populations have to be ready to face that reality.
Well, I do want to touch on one more thing. I'm having a good time here. This is a great conversation, and that is one of the things that's interesting here. Might not be talked about in the Middle East or other places, and that is that the U.S., the imperialists, the U.S., the European ruling elite, right, are not, they are being completely isolated throughout the world. If you look at the votes in the UN, the world is saying, hey, this is a genocide, this shouldn't happen. And the ruling elite of the US and even some of the Europeans are starting to fall off, right? Are isolated, but they're isolated from their own people. Look at what's happening in Germany. Look what's happening in France. The farmers, the everyday working class people are saying, we've had enough of these people. They're going to starve us and cost all of our jobs. In the United States, at the border, we've got damn near a civil war going on. We've got hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets, blocking bridges, saying this genocide must stop. The interesting thing is, the ruling elite are now isolated, not just in the world community, but even from their own people who are aghast, most of them, at the genocide and of the lack of concern whatsoever for the everyday working class. They're just destroying our lives, destroying our livelihoods, doing everything they can to make our lives miserable. Your thoughts on that dynamic?
Oh yeah, I mean, we saw Nancy Pelosi calling the demonstrators outside her house Russian and Chinese, you know, paid off. So, by the way, in Canada specifically, the issue of Palestine has awakened the discussion about colonialism inside Canada. Okay, and the rights of indigenous nations to decolonization. The most vocal voices in Canada for the liberation of Palestine and the end of the genocide in Gaza, have other than of course Palestinians in the Canada, have been the indigenous nations. Over the weekend, maybe on Friday or something, the Minister of Higher Education in British Columbia province of Canada, she's a Zionist white lady. She was on a webinar online, and she started talking about how Palestine was a crappy piece of land before the Zionist colonists came and bloomed the desert basically, and that the Palestinians didn't have commerce and so on, so they didn't deserve, because they didn't use the land correctly, they didn't deserve holding it. There was somebody better. And the backlash that came against this minister was led by the indigenous people of in British Columbia, the nations there, saying, God damn, this sounds a copy paste of the speak of the Canadian colonists against indigenous peoples for hundreds of years. And so much pressure came that she was forced to resign. So this is the first Western official in any European or European colony that had to resign for making racist Zionist statements. So we're seeing a beginnings of it. The revolt is happening on a wide scale, and as we get closer and closer to election dates in all these countries, these elite are going to have a choice. either to go against their people completely and be ready for revolutions. Canada has a lot of weapons in the hands of everybody, including indigenous peoples, and they've had armed confrontations with the Canadian authorities for decades. And similarly in the United States, it's everybody has the 2 or 3 weapons. In the US, not one. It's like, so this is a scary moment, but I hope that the peoples in these countries prepare themselves before these elections to actually make a change, force a change on the elite so it doesn't lead to those bloody outcomes that are possible.
Well, I keep saying last thing, but I will definitely make this the last thing because I don't want to take up all your entire morning. But
I'm
people
glad
are
to
in
be
the
with
chat
you all
saying,
the time.
oh, well, people are in the chat saying, oh, this is great. You've got to have Lath back all the time. I think that one of the things that is critical about this particular conflict is the world seeing the importance of a nation, a group of people taking a moral position. That's Yemen, but let me add this. South Africa and the Irish people who also were, genocided, all kind of terrible things. Talk about that. The South Africans, I mean, when I look at what they did, now I understand either Indonesia or Malaysia. I think Indonesia, they're putting together a case to go to the ICJ about the occupation, the illegal occupation. And they brought like hundreds of scholars to their capital. They watched what South Africa did, and they brought all these scholars together to put the case together. You know how it is. Black people aren't as smart, or the Indonesians or Asian aren't as, this group of that aren't as smart as the whatever the Westerners always try to play that argument. But we see these brilliant people, moral people in Yemen, in South Africa, in Indonesia, take these stances, and people of the world. What do you think is the importance of that?
I want to add Honduras because they just announced that they will be taking the United States, Canada, the UK, and Germany to the ICC for the aiding and abetting in the commission of genocide.
I think Nicaragua was involved in that one too.
Yes, so we see right now the peoples of the world that have lived, 600 years of West European colonialism and expansion, finally being able to speak to these issues of human rights and decolonization and so forth forcefully. I think now finally the retreat of, the West has no right to speak about any of these issues. Human rights and war crimes and what have you. They are the biggest committers of these and violators of human rights. South Africa, made all of Africa proud. And I want to say that Palestine is part of Africa. It's not just a emotional thing or a rhetorical thing. Actually, Palestine, if you look at the Africa continental plate, all of Palestine, all of Lebanon, and all of the coast of Syria are part of the African continental plate, and the Dead Sea and the Jordan Valley are the schism there that goes to the Red Sea that separates the Arabian plate from the African plate. So Palestine is not only rhetorically but factually is part of Africa, and South African people are blood brothers through struggle, and to see them stand up for Palestine this way is brought a lot of hope to humanity. To see black and brown faces leading this on an international scale, to see the diversity of voices, and now the West is forcing us into a position, and they either have to choose international law, that the Genocide Convention is a fact, Or if the US and the West refuse the rulings of these courts, that means the collapse of all the international law that has been written since World War II, and makes the Genocide Convention null, because nobody can implement it or enforce it.
Yeah, and it's the collapse of the empire because they utilize international law. That's an integral part of imperialism. They say, you, China, you're doing something to the Uyghurs. Oh, Russia, you're doing something to this group. So they constantly use international law as a tool when they desire to say, oh, we support international law 100%, and we can use that against this country or that country or whatever, right? If that's gone, their principal tool is gone. So if they discard international law, their tool for going around the world making the arguments to their people disappears. So at any rate, thanks a lot, Laith, and I better get running. I got a couple other things to do, but I look forward to having you again soon.
All right, see you soon. Love having you being on your show here. Miss you guys.
All right, thank you. Talk to you soon. And thanks, everybody. Don't forget, oh, by the way, let all 1,219 of you who are watching right now, I need you to hit the like button, and I need you to share. I need you to share this on all your social media platforms, since neither Laith and I are allowed. Neither of us. We're dangerous. You can see, listen to us. We're very dangerous people. We're very terrible, horrible people, and we can't be allowed to speak on any of the major social media platforms. So share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot.